first thought was hell, fire, and brimstone. But I watched the news report for the weather, and I listened to George Capron on the radio talking about the weather, and I thought we're getting enough heat. So we'll look at the other side. And that is a quote from the first reading from the Book of Wisdom. Those who are just must be kind. And that's another way of looking at we take that and the gospel together, especially the parable of the weeds and the wheat, which of the three, that seems to be the focus in the readings. It's very interesting. I had an opportunity while I was away to experience something about which I've often wondered. And my grandfather was a World War II veteran. He fought the Japanese up in the Aleutian Islands. And I've met quite a few other people who were veterans of the Second World War who fought either the Japanese or the Germans. And I've often wondered, what about the soldiers who were stationed in Japan or in Germany after the war? Because after the Second World War, as we did after the First World War, we weren't there to condemn, but to rebuild. To help the Germans, to help the Japanese rebuild their nation, start fresh, take things over on their own, and move forward. And so it was for those who were victorious to be kind, to be gentle, and to be encouraging. Not to gloat over the fact that we were right and they were wrong. And so that's something that, for whatever reason, I've often wondered about. The last 7.5 weeks that I've been away, I had the chance to do 3 different things, the last of which, and I enjoyed all 3 of them, don't get me wrong, but the last of which was the most relaxing. The first of which, I was in Kuwait, as you know, with our Seabees, both active duty and reserves. Some Seabees were going in from the United States to Afghanistan or Iraq to replace Seabees who were coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan and getting ready to return home. And my job was to supervise the junior chaplains and oversee what's called this warrior transition program. And I also facilitated some of the sessions so that the chaplains who were overseas with their CBs had a chance to relax as well. And that was very enjoyable, 122 degrees, 90 degrees at night, and you have to wear long sleeves. Somebody made a comment before Mass, "Father, where's your tan?" But you don't walk around in shorts and flip-flops. So, it was, the only thing I didn't like about it were, I think if you were in Aruba, you'd call it the trade winds. But in Kuwait, we don't call it the trade winds. It's a constant 18 miles an hour. Take your blow dryer, put it to your face, and just hold it there. And that's what the wind was like all the time. But the experience of being with the Seabees was very good. And that's my job as a senior CB chaplain. The last part of the job, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and which is why I joined the Navy, was I was out at sea. If I wanted to be in the desert all the time, I would have joined the Marines. I would have joined the Army. I joined the Navy to go to sea. But that's not the way it's been lately. So the last 3.5 weeks, I spent hopping from ship to ship. I was on 2 destroyers, a Coast Guard cutter, a submarine tender, and a submarine. They had not seen a Catholic priest in over 90 days. Interestingly, and it's just the way the dice rolled, the captain and the executive officer of both destroyers were Catholic. And almost 40% of everybody I saw were Catholic. So it was great to have a chaplain stop by, but they had not had Mass said in over 90 days. So it was busy, but there's nothing like waking up in the morning and hearing the time rang off the ship's bell. Not, they keep time a little differently at sea. It was sandy, so we had the foghorn going every 2 minutes, and the seas were a little rough, so you had that sway. Boy, I slept like a baby. And so that was the end of my time overseas, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I hadn't been out to sea since 2004. The middle, is what reminded me, today's gospel reminded me of, and I thought I'd share that with you. The middle of my time was spent on 2 oil platforms. Long, long platforms that take 6 tankers, 3 on each side. And they do nothing but 24/7 pump raw oil out of the ground and fill these tankers. And you can see it takes 2 days, 2.5 days to fill a tanker. You can watch these big ships slowly sink into the water. You know, you can see all the red paint, and then all of a sudden they're right down to where the black paint starts on the hull as they then sail away. And all these empty tankers lined up, getting ready to come in and fill up and then go throughout the world to deliver oil. These platforms we control the security of and are slowly turning them over to the Iraqis. So for a few days, I had the opportunity to spend time with the Iraqi Navy and military, who were, the last time I deployed, the enemy. And now we were eating side by side, sharing stories. One was a Christian. Don't forget, in Iraq, Catholicism and Christianity were tolerated at one time. And one was a Christian, the rest were Muslims. And it was so enjoyable as we slowly turn over their own oil platforms back to them so that they can take control of what is theirs and begin to build their own economy again. But the thought occurred to me, here we are, sitting at a table, eating, laughing, telling stories, sharing sea stories, and as sailors do, of course sailors never lie, they certainly tell tall tales or spin a yarn, but they never lie. So we lied to each other about things. And it was a very enjoyable time, although somewhat tense, because of the fact that not too long ago we were enemies. And that's where we look at the first reading from Wisdom. Those who are just must be kind. At the end of World War II, a former president, who is not remembered fondly, was asked by Harry Truman to head up a program pretty much feeding Europe, and that was Herbert Hoover. We did it at the end of the First World War, not without problems, nothing's perfect. The Union helped the South after the Civil War, and we're doing it now after the war on terrorism as it slowly winds down. What about ourselves as Christians, one-to-one? Winston Churchill had many great quotes, some of them funny, some of them you can't repeat in church. But one of them, which was very, very powerful, is magnanimity is the virtue of victors. We who are right, not we who think we're right, but we who are objectively right in the way we live and in what we do, must be kind. The opening prayer talks about helping us to grow in faith, in hope, and in love. When Jesus came to the upper room, he didn't condemn the apostles for deserting him, but rather the first thing out of his mouth, his first words, were offering his peace, a peace the world cannot give. We as a nation have always reached out. No matter how others have treated us, we have always reached out when we're called upon to help rebuild, whether it's after a war or a natural disaster or some disease. And we as individuals, as followers of Jesus Christ, must also try to live that way one-on-one in our neighborhood, in our household, at work, here in the parish. We who are just must be kind. We must be magnanimous in how we deal with others. That's not to say that we don't confront evil. As Christians, we must, as Jesus did, confront evil. It's interesting in the gospel, the owner of the property says to his workers, "Do not pull up the weeds, for you may pull up the wheat as well, but rather wait until the end, when the angels come, and they'll sort it out." We have to confront evil. Those weeds were recognized, and they will be dealt with. But we confront evil with love. confront evil with charity. We can never confront evil with evil, or what wins? And so, we look at our own lives, and we ask ourselves, with that opening prayer and that first reading, am I a person of faith? Do I have hope in the promise of Jesus Christ? Do I treat others with love? And if I am just, and we're not always, none of us are perfect, but if I am just, am I therefore kind?